you should really have that vision for what your team, your company needs to be, and you should know the roles that you're going to need to get there. That's leadership. That's what you have to do, and you need to find those individuals that, when they are doing what they need to be doing, are going to fill those roles. But there's always tough decisions that have to get made sometimes. So.
How do you balance the culture of quality control against the time part of your equation? Especially when your clients don't account for design, they probably don't account for QC in their design.
No, that's an excellent point. I mean, the point I made earlier, who has unlimited amounts of hours in their projects? No one does anymore, and it's getting harder and harder. I think that's where, when you're doing it right, your team is doing QC just as what they do. They're just vested into making the projects better almost from the start. And you need to almost move away from the idea of there must be a QC time in a project. I think, and again, this goes back to some of the lessons out of Special Forces. They don't like have a final, that's just what they do. From the start of it, that's how they train, is in that we do it right from the start type of mentality. And yeah, they have debriefings and they're always learning, they're always training. But when the rubber meets the road, they've already taken those steps to do it right.
Some of my mistakes have not been technical mistakes, but a mistake in letting a job go out the door before it was ready. Okay, the client says this is when we need it, but really, and the team did the best in its, talk about constraints in the time we had to get the job together, but what really I should have told them is, look, either this is not in a shape yet to go out at all and we need another week, we need another 2 weeks, or tell them, okay, we can give this to you, but it's a progress set. Use it for your general budgeting, but don't send it to one of your subs to make shop drawings.
Excellent point. And in design build world, that gets even harder, because the second that drawing leaves the office, it seems like they've already started detailing, and you're kind of explaining what preliminary means. Excellent point.
Over here on the left.
I have a question. More of like a scenario. If one of your young engineers, you're the managers, you're in charge of them, makes a mistake, what do you think is a better way of proceeding? Either making the young engineer take full responsibility for it, or you take the responsibility? And what do you think is better for them to learn?
That's a really good question. It probably depends on a lot of factors. The gentleman I included in the story, Hokie, from the very first story. Hokie was a pretty tough individual. I'm not convinced that there was anything he ever asked me to do he didn't already know the answer of how it was going to come around. But he let me suffer thinking it was on my shoulders. I think there's value, especially before someone has their PE, to putting that responsibility on them and making them think that they, what they're doing matters, because it does. And, I think that's, at some point, that's a critical lesson to learn. You've got to do it right. It would really just depend. I think it depends on the maturity of the individual. It depends on the scenario that's coming. There is value to putting that responsibility on them, but then it's ultimately the PE or the project manager or the leader of the business to take that responsibility and make sure that it's, they're not going to hurt themselves too bad or hurt your company with it. So,
how do you perceive technology contributing to the increase in mistakes or diminishing it? And my point is I see more and more young people coming into the businesses, in engineering and construction, I believe, that come from a background where they didn't really have exposure to engineering or construction in their youth. And so they're coming into a whole field where they've learned all the mechanics and the technology, but they don't have just a general feel for how a building goes together.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to the education, and co-ops are fantastic. Look for individuals that have co-op experience, that kind of thing. As far as what technology brings to it, technology is a tool. That's all it should be. And if we're not instilling that with kids that graduate, then that should also be included. That there is a vast amount of learning that still needs to occur. On the bridge, again, that very first project, I was asked to do hand calculations several times, which was a very humbling experience. And that, I think it's just part of the process. As leaders and as managers, we need to demonstrate the value of technology. We can't do what we do. We talk about time crunches. You're not going to get a project done if you're not using some kind of computer-aided analysis program. Yet at the same time, that's again where leadership and management step in to demonstrate that it's a tool. It is not the end-all of what we do. There is no, 3, 2, 1 click and you have a building designed or a grading plan done. That's not going to happen. There's always going to be the engineer, I think, and teaching kids the role of what they are now to do with those tools is important.
I have a follow-up to that question. Technology is used for design, but another thing I've heard a lot of engineers tell me is that mistakes are being made because of distractions from technology. And I read this really interesting book this summer called The Hidden Brain by Sean Carpenter. Fascinating human psychology study. He talks about unconscious bias and things like that. But one of the things I took away with it is that study after study has shown that the human brain can really only actively focus on 1 or 2 things at a time. So if you've got texts coming in every couple of minutes, I see our engineers checking email constantly. How much do you think that contributes to mistakes that we're seeing today?
Oh, I think it's huge. Again, it goes back to that mental capacity thing. It's not just stress when we're talking about that factor there. It's what's your mind thinking about at the time, and you're not going to. I've come in on days where I had a lot going on and looked at my calculations from the day before and was thinking, what in the world was I even doing? And I have to redo it. And there's days that I had emails flying in. I think it comes down to a personal work ethic, and there's a lot of strategies out there about answering phones during the day or answering emails, but it's a challenge. I communicate with clients by text now, and so the whole reason they're texting me is because I won't answer my email. So that's just the reality of it.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Actually, I have a quick comment. It's short.
All right.
You've talked a lot about young engineers making mistakes, and I just like to say, in my career, I have been the young engineer who finds the mistake of a senior engineer, and I have been the senior engineer when a young engineer comes to me and says, I think you did this wrong. It happens on both sides of the fence. No matter how experienced we get, we're all still going to make mistakes, and it's not just going to be the younger members.
Absolutely, great point. Yeah, you want to see a senior guy make a mistake, put an engineer in charge of doing contracts or negotiations, and you will see mistakes being made.
Okay, I think one more in the back, and then.
At what point will you no longer tolerate mistakes?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
At what point will you no longer tolerate mistakes?
At what point? Ooh, that's a loaded question. I'm not sure. I would be curious if that individual or that person or that group was in the right role. If they're making that many mistakes, they're probably not where they need to be. Now, do they need to be let go of the company? This kind of goes back to the question down here earlier. I don't know. That depends a lot on your company and the roles you have. But the point is, we've got different things that we do. We manage people, we manage projects, we manage business. Very often we ask the same individual to do all 3 of those things, and it could be just as simple as that's not a good engineer. He's got an engineering background, but he's just not a good engineer, and no matter what you do, he's never going to be a good engineer. I would venture to sit down with him, build that relationship, find out when he is doing what he wants to do, what's that look like? Maybe it's speaking in a seminar or a conference. Maybe he's extremely comfortable talking to clients or on a project doing field reports. The point is there's a lot to what we do as civil engineers, and I think companies just have to take that look at their employees and see where they fit if they're not doing well at the role that they're in right now. So.
Okay, well, we're out of time, but I just want to say thanks again, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, that's true.
thank you.
So it's, yeah.
Actually, they're usually looking so much more closely.
Oh, no.
WB.
Did you really? I got an MBA from WB.
Yeah, but since you're engineering.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you.
Really have this.
So try living in Morgantown. What's really, really funny is
It's gotta be good.
as the director of sports, we get all of WB's athletic projects.
Yeah.
So every project they've done since they went to the football stadium, the baseball stadium, the aquatic center now, the instructional engineering, they graduate.
That's hilarious.
You don't know how many times just tempted to like write good pin on a piece of steel or something. But you know it as well as I do. I'll take it.
It's crazy. I did the opposite.
Oh, you're in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh and I went to WB and I went back to Pittsburgh. So I'm the complete different millennial friend.
Where do you live at?
I'm in Dormont, South Hills.
I grew up in Beaver County.
Okay. Well, I wanted to grab your card. Our younger members would really benefit. We have like an annual like dinner, and it's usually like students.
Can we flip it? Because I gave out all my cards
Yeah.
there, and I feel horrible. I will contact you.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I would love to come to these. In fact, I met some of your folks in the ASCE younger members. They did like a river cruise.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, it would be the same dinner function. Maybe not on a boat, but
I'd love to.
that's awesome. Glad I got to meet you here.
I'm a fifth grade also.
Cool, very good. What year?
I graduated in 1980.
Okay. My uncle was there about that. He was a mechanical aeronaut.
Great
Funny thing is, I read talking about the deans.
Oh, I was so happy.
It's just one of them. It's perseverance.
I know, right? Well, what I really fascinated me is being instructional is so different from being instructional student.
I said, hey, but just gotta get through the coursework.
Then you actually learn. It's good to be a good
Okay, thanks. Good job.
And we had a beer there.
Oh, I'm with Williams.
Hey, how are you?
Thank you very much.
You
don't have that, not recorded anymore yet.
Actually, I need to just grab this right here, but it's not going to be a good video, but